I drove up the hill behind a car. The car got to the crest of the hill when he first saw the castle, the couple did, and they just stopped the car. And this happens all the time. First of all, my great-grandfather was one of California's first winemakers. Started in 1885, worked hard, did well, but then Prohibition forced him out of business. After Prohibition, my great-grandfather was 77 years old, so he didn't want to go back in the wine business. Yeah, he's my age, yeah. And then his sons went in the insurance business, did well in that. But typical Italian, all this is complex stories. In the old days, prior to the '06 earthquake, San Francisco had a lot of wineries. Oakland, Richmond, Marin had a lot of wineries. And it made sense. The roads were so bad, there was no bridge. You'd have to bring the grapes in a wagon or in a barge. Had you brought bottled wine down to where the customers were in the urban areas, you would have broken some of the bottles before you ever got them down there. So basically, many, if not most of the wineries were in the metropolitan areas where the customers were. So they'd bring the grapes down there. So typical Italian, my relatives lived above the winery, and it's still there. It's not a winery anymore, 23rd and Bryant in the Mission District, and they still have full cellars underneath. And so as a kid, my parents would go over and visit the relatives. The first thing I ever noticed was the reek of wine when they'd open the door, and I'd go up the steps to where they were. So I heard the stories, played in the cellar, saw the barrels, and I determined as a kid I was going to not revive, but try to encourage them to revive the family winery, which was called Sattui. At that point, too, I renamed it Sattui to give honor to my great-grandfather. And then at some point, I could take it over. Well, that never happened. So after traveling in Europe and goofing off a little bit, I decided I didn't have a job. I came back to California. What am I going to do? Well, and the answer came really quickly. I'm going to do what I always wanted to do, which is revive Sattui Winery. Problem is, I didn't know anything about wine. I had a little money I made in Europe, and so I had $5,000. My mother gave me $3,000 more, so I had $8,000. I thought I could start Sattui on $100,000, and I was convinced I could do that. I never raised $100,000. The most I ever raised was $62,500 from some other people. I didn't realize UC Davis had done a study saying that to start a small winery you needed $1 million. I didn't see that study, so I thought I could do it $100,000, which I never got. In any case, when I started out, I rented all my winery equipment. I didn't own the property. I didn't own the building. I couldn't afford a cash register. I had a little wooden box, made change, and wrote up every sale by hand. And my office had a hand crank calculator I spent $15 for. I had a reject door for $3 over 2 old barrels. That was my office. I slept in the winery. I slept in my van. I did everything to not go broke. I was 33 when I started the winery, yeah. And I built it. Somebody else financed it. Fortunately, I got an option to buy it back, but he got an option to take stock, which he converted and made some money on that. We made a tiny profit the first year, $2,640. Otherwise, I would have had to go back scrubbing tanks for Christian Brothers. But I worked my tail off in doing it. I'd come home so tired. I worked 7 days a week. I'd just fall asleep. We didn't have hardly any furniture. I had a bed, but often I'd just fall asleep on the floor in a beanbag. Anyway, so it was really tough in the beginning, but I was determined I was going to make it work, and I just, my wife kept telling me it was going to fail, and, you hear it enough time from enough people, and you start wondering about our first day. We did $141 at Sattui, gross. And we only did, in a 9-hour day, we only did that because a couple neighbors came and bought a bottle. A banker came who wouldn't lend me money, by the way, and bought a bottle, and then none of them ever came back. The second day we did, I think it was $76 in a 9-hour day, gross. It was myself and my wife, and she kept saying, I told you were going to go broke. And so I was scared to death, but I was determined not to fail. And we even had a deli case. It was rusting over at a market recently, Dean and DeLuca, and I covered the rust with some redwood, and I got an electrician to make it work. So I did everything. I didn't know how you were supposed to do it in the wine business because I didn't know anything about the wine business. So I did it my way, which was picnic grounds, a delicatessen, giving people a lot of reasons to stop at Sattui that other people weren't doing. Selling direct. We invented selling direct. Everybody laughed at me then, and now a lot of people are trying to copy me. For years and years, I worked at taste room. I did everything. I cleaned the bathroom at Sattui. I had no money when I started. I slept in my van. I slept in the winery floor. I did everything. Took cold shower. I lived in one room for 11 years till my wife said, "You're a winery owner in Napa Valley. Why are we living in one room?" I did have a bathtub, but I had no kitchen, a hot plate. But I was always saving my money to reinvest in Sattui Winery. And so for, I don't know, 12 years or so, I worked tasting room as well as I managed the deli. I did pretty much, as we grew, then we hired more employees. And initially here, I worked the tasting room as well for the first 5-6 years. But I'm starting to lose my hearing. I'm almost 78. I'm starting to lose my hearing a little bit. So I don't normally work the tasting room anymore. I occasionally give a tour, but I'm more involved on the business side of it. Sure. At Sattui, I made the wine because I had no money. I couldn't afford a winemaker. And the first few wines, I admit, weren't very good. And then they got better as I learned and corrected my mistakes. And then finally, I was able to afford a winemaker. Now the current winemaker, Brooks Painter, he's great, much, much better than I ever was. I didn't say I'm Dario Sattui, the owner of the Castello di Amorosa or Sattui Winery. I don't go around saying I'm the owner of the castle. No. But if people recognize me, I'm happy to take a photo with them, happy to talk with them. And I've always been really hands-on at Sattui and here, because it's one thing getting a report of what's going on, but that may be false, it may be exaggerated, it may be somebody else's interpretation of what's going on, and incorrect or somewhat incorrect. So I like to be really involved. So I'm come up here often and spend a couple hours and just watching people, watching pours, watching the service, just how they deal. Our customer service is real important to me. And so I'm trying to watch everything I can to make sure that it's working. Some of the customers have become good friends, or some acquaintances at least, and so I get what it gives me. Look, I like making money. I won't deny it. First of all, I had no idea if this would ever work, but I think I'm honest to myself. I get more satisfaction than making money by giving enjoyment to people, enjoyment in the architecture they see, enjoyment in the wines they taste and hopefully buy. And if they're pleased and excited when they leave, I know they're going to go home and tell their friends. And so if I can give a great experience and great wines and good value, I think I've done it all, and it makes me feel good knowing that I brought some pleasure, some happiness to other people. And so I feel real good about that.